Welcome to Ouch. Was that a ghost? This podcast may contain graphic material, which some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised.
Help me.
Now that we covered that, here's your host, Liz.
Welcome back. And before I start, I just want to welcome Jill, our newest Patreon. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. So today's episode was supposed to be a Torture Tuesday, and somehow it evolved into this story. This week, I'm covering the now decommissioned West Virginia State Penitentiary, or Moundsville, as it's often called. The facility being built near a Native American burial ground. And with almost 1,000 inmate deaths on the site, it's no wonder it's often referred to as one of the most haunted prisons in America. So before West Virginia became a state, a quick little history. Virginia was one of the earliest territories in the United States, being established in 1607, which included what is now West Virginia. Internal divisions arose with the eastern population investing more in and owning more slaves. There were a lot of plantation owners, while the Westerners leaned more towards investing in land, small farming families. The East holding most of the power. They had the state capital, Richmond, it was on their side. And the taxes were higher on land, but lower on slaves, benefiting the East. And by 1861, the U.S. was engulfed in the Civil War, intensifying the already politically divided Virginia, with the Westerners supporting the federal government, while the East stood with the Confederate States. 2 years later, West Virginia declared independence, becoming the 35th state on June 20th, 1863, splitting the largest state in the Union. So now, 1863, West Virginia has seceded from Virginia. They're doing their own thing. But now they needed their own governmental buildings, their penitentiary, City Hall, new capital. And in 1864, the then governor, Arthur Borman, asked the West Virginia legislature for a state penitentiary. And the legislature repeatedly said no. Send the inmates to another state or to the Ohio County Jail. Just get them out of here. In 1865, the legislature kind of changed their tune when 9 inmates escaped, and the press got involved, pushing for this much-needed penitentiary. So in 1866, the legislature was like, okay, sure, I guess you can have one. So they approved a purchase of a 10-acre piece of land for $3,000 across from the Grave Creek Mound. This was a huge, over 60-foot Adena conical mound. It's said to date back to 250 to maybe 150 BC. In 1838, this mound was excavated, but all around where the prison was going to be built was not. So I'm sure there are plenty of burial spots of Native Americans and others still around there. So construction began on the West Virginia State Penitentiary in 1866. This being the first penal institution of West Virginia. It's located in Moundsville, hence the name Moundsville Penitentiary. There are no blueprints, but information has been passed down by word of mouth and the earliest archives kind of compiled. This description I got is from the Ohio County Library. The design concept of the penitentiary follows the Auburn Plan, developed in Auburn, New York, also called the Silent System. The concept dated back to 1818 with a type of cell block where the cells are enclosed within a grate containing building with cells back to back in several tiers in height. This was also designated as the inside cell type of construction. It was often made of steel. The cell blocks were large, airy, and sanitary, where inmates were able to work together during the day and were separated at night. In 1868, they built a temporary wooden prison structure with like a wooden stockade for a yard. This bought them more time to finish up designing the penitentiary. They decided to use the same style as the Northern Illinois Joliet prison, which you may know from the exterior shots from Prison Break Season 1. It's very castle-like with turrets and battlements. They took the plan of the Juliet prison but kind of cut it in half, so it was a smaller scale. The first building constructed was the North Wagon Gate. It was made from sandstone, using convicts and citizens for labor. And this was followed by the North and the South buildings, which kind of mirrored each other with 224 cells in each building. The cells were 5 by 7. The North Hall also had the chapel, kitchen, and dining hall. And there was a 4-story tower that was built connecting the two halls. When it officially opened, it held 251 inmates, some of whom helped build it. In the administration building, the tower that was built connecting the two, North and South, on the 4th floor, the warden lived with his family. Below the warden, the females were housed. Additions were added onto the penitentiary, and by the end of the 1800s, they had a wash house, stables, wagon shop, blacksmith, paint shop, bakery, tailor, hospital. The hospital, which came in handy during the typhoid fever outbreak in 1889. They even had an elevator put in, and this is also home to the wheel. It's like a revolving cage door. It's one of only 2 in the world, the other being in England, I think. It almost looks like a cage on a carnival ride, not the Gravitron, but the open one. And it only has one opening. So when people would go through this revolving door, they knew that most likely they weren't coming out. The place originally lit with coal lamps, and in the 1900s, they went to electricity. Moundsville is very Gothic in appearance, which was popular at the time, having turrets and battlements. The same way a castle was designed to provide protection and security, it gave like a really fortress look. Even the windows were designed in such a way to allow light in for certain time periods throughout the day. They built the walls up, but also they built them down. They went down about 5 feet, so if an inmate decided to try to tunnel out, he'd be hitting cement. This is info from the Ohio County Library that was compiled about the facility. Some of the best descriptive records of the quality of life inside the prison and its operations are the reports by the wardens to the governor in the 1920s. A report to Governor Ward M. Gore in 1926 describes the reception and later discharge of the prisoners as, when a prisoner is received at the penitentiary, he's once enrolled and given a serial number. Then he's required to bathe. He was given a haircut, a shave, and if it's winter, he was dressed in prison clothes of cadet gray. If it was summer, a lighter material would be used. After a prisoner has been received, as stated above, he's given a thorough examination by the prison's physicians, who carefully note all defects and keep a complete record of his examination. He is then measured by the deputy warden according to the Bertillon system. Once he got his whole record made, a photograph would be taken and filed with it. If the prisoner was able-bodied, he was assigned to one of the factories operated within the prison. And the prisoner was required to labor 9 hours every day, except Saturday afternoon, Sundays, and holiday. When a prisoner's term has expired and the day comes for his final discharge, he's given a complete new outfit of citizen's clothing of good material. Transportation is paid him to the county from which he was sent, and cash allowance of $3 is given to him, providing he does not have any money to his credit in the office. Prisoners are frequently discharged who have several $100s to their credit. This represents the money made by overtime work in shops, with prisoners being paid for all the overtime at the same rate that the state is paying their labor, which seems pretty fair. There was a prison farm and a coal mine that opened nearby about a mile away, and a handful of prisoners were allowed to reside at the mine camp while working the mine. At the farm, they grew fresh produce, which they ate, and they used the coal from the mine to power the facility. And they were earning good time on top of all this, 7.5 days a month in good time. So that's over a week off of your sentence per month that you work. That's not too shabby. They housed about 80 women who could work making collars and cuffs and domestic work up until 1947, where the females were transferred to a new facility that opened for them. They also had a band, a library, a print shop with their own magazine called Work and Hope, They had clergy, and they would use the auditorium for services. There was the death house, as they performed executions from 1899 up until 1949, when the death penalty was abolished in West Virginia. The death house had 4 holding cells on the first floor. The second floor was the chaplain's office, and the guard's dining room and the library. The building no longer stands. It was taken down in the 70s. Along the south side of the facility, they used a patch of land that was originally supposed to be a road for a temporary cemetery for the inmates. Then they moved all those burial sites around 1890 because of the drainage issues to what is called the White Gate Cemetery today. It's a little under a mile from the penitentiary. There lie executed men, unclaimed bodies, and inmates that died from natural causes or illnesses like tuberculosis or infections while incarcerated. The penitentiary was very self-sufficient through the early parts of the 20th century. Conditions were seen as adequate. Prisoners worked in gardens, masonry, tailors, bakers, all the shops. Over the years, the facilities expanded. They added, removed walls, added buildings, removed buildings. However, overcrowding became an issue. By the early 1900s, it hit points where over 2,000 inmates were housed there, with the facility's capacity number at 650. So in the 5x7 cell, there would be 2 bunks connected to the wall, and they would put 3 people in the cells. So 1 would be on each bunk, and 1 would have to sleep on the floor in front of the toilet. So the overcrowding of the inmate on top of the understaffed prison workers, the conditions just worsened over the years. The penitentiary became infested with vermin, with maggots, ticks, fleas, rats, living conditions, plus just having cramped quarters, and this being a penitentiary, animosity and just tension grew within the inmates. All this together, the prison became known as one of the most violent prisons by the Department of Justice. Between all the fights, the living conditions, and the riots. In 1973, 40 inmates held 5 COs hostage, and after 24 hours of negotiation with the then Governor Arch Moore, 15 demands were accepted. They weren't crazy demands. It was like, we want clean sheets. We want to be able to flush the toilet. The 5 guards were released unharmed, and the body of Willie Hale, a fellow inmate, who is said to have been murdered by other inmates because he seemed like he was too chummy with the warden. It was around this time that the Sugar Shack, which was used as the yard when it was raining or whatever conditions didn't allow them outside, it was located in the basement. It was just a big, large rec room with pillars where 400 to 600 inmates would gather. It became a place of gambling, so there was fighting, there was consensual and non-consensual sexual acts. In this room that has all these pillars and blind spots, guards weren't really too keen on going in there because the ratio of guards to prisoners plus blind spots, it's too dangerous, on top of the fact that there's only one way in and one way out. So while the inmates were in there, they sort of self-policed themselves. The penitentiary had many notable inmates, including Carl Panzeram, who murdered 22 boys, a member of Bonnie and Clyde's gang. Labor activist Eugene Debs served time at Moundsville for crimes pertaining to the Espionage Act of 1917, and Kathleen Maddox, who was Charles Manson's mother. Because they housed women up until 1947, she served some time there for armed robbery. When her and her brother went to go rob a guy with a very unconventional weapon, a ketchup bottle that they filled with salt. The bottle was jammed into the guy's back, and the guy was like, "That's not a gun." So Kathleen's brother took the bottle of ketchup and hit him over the head with it. They stole $35 and the guy's car. Kathleen Maddox's brother got 10 years while Kathleen got 5. And it said that Charles Manson visited her when he was between 9 and 7 years old, while she was serving time at the Moundsville Penitentiary. Years later, when Charles Manson was incarcerated, he sent a letter requesting to be transferred to Moundsville to be near family. In the letter that he wrote to the warden, he talked about how he was a good worker and honest. And the then warden Holland wrote back 4 words: "When hell freezes over." So needless to say, his request was denied. The penitentiary, even with the military frame and the high walls, I think it said 24 feet high and 5 feet down, there were 510 escapes from 1960 to 1995. A man named Fast Freddy made 13 attempts. In one escape in 1979, 15 prisoners made it outside of the gates of Moundsville. Ronald William, an inmate, after gaining control of a CO's weapon, led himself and 14 other prisoners out. While the inmates were in Moundsville, an off-duty state trooper, Philip Kesner, happened to be driving by the prison and saw the prisoners in the streets. Although he was with his wife, Officer Philip Kesner did attempt to take action with the escapees, and the prisoners pulled Kesner from his car. Ronald Williams ended up killing the off-duty trooper, and Williams spent another 1.5 years on the run doing a little crime spree before being apprehended again and getting more time tacked on. As the years passed, the conditions in the facility were deplorable. It was so bad that quite a few inmates took their own lives rather than deal with the fear or the filth between the other inmates and the guards' misconduct. And this is why I'm covering the whole Moundsville Penitentiary, because this was supposed to be a Torture Tuesday on the Kicking Jenny, but it somehow evolved. So according to the Inquirer from 1886, the Kicking Jenny, it is an instrument invented and built in the prison. It is made somewhat in the shape of a quarter circle, with the highest end about 3 or 4 feet above the platform for which it is set. The prisoner is stripped naked and bent over upon the machine. His feet are fastened to the floor with ropes, while his hands, which are stretched over the upper end, are tied with ropes attached to small blocks, by which a tension so strong that the frame of the prisoner can almost be torn in two, can be made with a slight pull. After the prisoner is placed in a position, the superintendent, or whoever does the whipping, takes a heavy whip made of sole leather, 2 pieces of which, about 3 feet long, are sewed together, and the ends scraped, slightly rounding, the lash being 3 inches broad at the handle, tapering to a point. With the whip, the prisoner is beaten until he is almost dead, or the strength of the man who is doing the whipping gives out. In the article, the man claims to have seen men whipped until they were covered with great purple and red welts from their hips to their shoulders, claiming the lash would make a long welt across the body. Perhaps the next blow would fall across the others, when the blood would let out of the wounds, and the victim's back would be one mass of blood, torn and lacerated skin and flesh. In this article, the superintendent, Josh E. Peck at the time, was named as the reason behind this torture device. Among those who were beaten so cruelly was John G. Roberts, whom the superintendent once beat with whips so cruelly that he bore the scars from June until December. The man in the article says that the beating was done in my room, and I was afraid he would kill the man, so I begged him to stop. Before he did kill him for my interference, I was roundly cursed and abused by the superintendent. When asked what became of Roberts, the man said he is dead. He lies buried under the walls. When asked how many of them have died, the man claims, for 14 months, at least 2 died every month, and every one of them has been brutally treated and punished. And the man claimed that a lot of these men that were killed in this manner were buried in the wall. And some of the men that were so brutally punished would die weeks later due to these injuries. The Kicking Jenny not being the only torture instrument used in the facility, there was also the shoe fly, which, according to that same article, was an instrument so arranged that the victim could be placed with his feet in the stocks and his arms pinioned above his head, fastened so that he could not move it. Then someone would take the hose and turn the water full upon the prisoner's face. This was kept until the victim was partly strangled to death. Imagine a man receiving a stream of water from an inch nozzle full in the face without the power of changing his position. Then think of the stream being ice-cold water, and you could form an idea. I mean, these guys didn't have to just worry about other inmates. They had to worry about the guards and the higher-ups within the facility. There were plenty of riots, but the one that occurred on New Year's Day in 1986 was the one that put in motion the closure of Moundsville as a penitentiary. When the inmates initiated a massive prison riot because it was New Year's Day, so the penitentiary was extra short-staffed, people called in. The prisoners took 14 people. 13 were prison workers. There was one outside food service worker who was taken hostage as well. One inmate named Danny Lyman, who was the president of a bike gang named the Avengers, he was appointed the inmate liaison or spokesman. And this whole riot sparked over the conditions they were living in. There were rats, maggots, cockroaches, sewerage leaking pipes. The riot ended when an agreement was made on a list that the inmates put together of 21 demands. I couldn't find what these demands were and if all of them were met or not, but they came to some sort of agreement. And all the hostages were released, but there were 3 dead inmates that were killed by other inmates during this riot. Throughout the remaining years of the prison, overcrowding was still an issue. The inmate-to-guard ratio was at unsafe numbers. It was almost like the prisoners ran the penitentiary. It was ultimately due to this riot and negotiations and talks that were held between the prisoner and the governor that caused the final closure of Moundsville as a prison. After the West Virginia Supreme Court in 1986 found that 5x7 cells and the conditions at the facility constituted cruel and unusual punishment. With insufficient living space and inhumane conditions, the sewerage issues, and the infestations. The penitentiary was ultimately decommissioned in 1995, with any remaining inmates moved to other facilities. Since then, there are stories galore of frightening sights, putrid smells, even horrifying cries coming from cells. Shadows in hallways. Many paranormal teams have made their visits and filmed their shows at Moundsville. The decommissioned facility is now home to many known and unknown entities. I mean, there was almost 1,000 inmate deaths at the penitentiary. 94 prisoners were executed by order of the courts at the facility, with some being buried in the walls of the penitentiary. One of the more well-known people that were hung there, Harry Powers, aka Cornelius Pearson, who was a con artist that used the Lonely Hearts columns to lure women, and he allegedly murdered over 50, but he was only convicted of murdering 2 women and 3 children. And then there were botched executions. In 1949, Frank Heyer, he was an abusive husband who beat his wife, Eva Heyer, to death on October 19th, 1930. He was like, "Oh, I was drunk," but he was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. Frank, who was a pretty big guy and a pretty big talker, confessed he did it, but it was the whiskey. Part of his final words being, "I'm not afraid to die." So they put the noose around his neck. You know, the public execution, everyone's there watching. The trapdoor opens, but the pressure was too strong on his neck, and him being a heavy guy, so he was decapitated. And this was a public hanging. So they decided after this, maybe they shouldn't do those anymore. And after this, it became by invitation only. Then when they decided that the electric chair was a more humane form of execution, they brought in Old Sparky, like in the Green Mile. I never knew different states name their chair differently, but I guess Old Sparky's a pretty popular name. But the chair that was used from 1951 to 1959 was used on 9 inmates, and it's currently on display at the West Virginia Penitentiary. I think I heard an inmate actually made the chair. And the chair, when it was active, was equipped with 3 buttons, so that 3 executioners could each press a button so no one knew who actually initiated the inmate's death. It was put out of service in 1959 when West Virginia abolished the death penalty. It's now located in the gift shop of the penitentiary so people can see it when they're visiting. But with all the deaths by execution, riots, other inmates, or the diseases that ravage throughout the overcrowded penitentiary, it's no wonder why there's so many reports of the paranormal. On top of the fact that inmates would say that if you died in the penitentiary, then your soul would stay there. Even well before the penitentiary closed, there were strange stories reported from former inmates and guards that would see inmates in areas that were off limits, and then somebody else would go and look for them, and there would be nothing there. People report seeing shadows, seeing former inmates by other guards or other officials, in the Phantom Shadow Man. One television station anchor was lucky enough, or unlucky enough, to actually capture proof of the paranormal at Moundsville. While she was doing an interview, the anchor believed that she saw a man down the hall until she realized she could see through the man. She was able to snap a picture on her camera, and you can find that online if you want to look that up. There have been reports of voices, whispers, yelling, laughing, cold spots throughout the penitentiary and on the grounds surrounding. And the Moundsville Penitentiary is also right across the street from Grave Creek Mound, which I mentioned earlier, which is the conical burial mound. Just picture a big hill over 60 feet tall and the base about 240 feet wide. It's like a big grave. It was said to be made by the Adinas, which were a Native American group, and the mound said to date back to around 250 BC. And I don't think messing with any Native American burial ground has ever been a good idea. On top of that, it's also said that about 10% of the inmate population were Satan worshipers. Throughout the facility, you can see graffiti drawn by inmates, and a lot of it being satanic in their cells and around. One inmate, named Kenneth Chance, even sued the facility, demanding a robe, a chalice, and privacy in a dark room to practice his satanic rituals. There have been 36 reported homicides within the prison walls. One of them happened in the boiler room, which is down some concrete steps. It's said to be a super hot spot now, where prisoner 44670, or RD Wall, was serving time for rape. His job at the facility was a maintenance worker. He was heading to the boiler room to grab some cleaning supplies when inmates who thought that he was a snitch rushed him and used a metal shiv. They severed his fingers and nearly severed his head off. Then they put him in a bathroom stall, propped him up against the wall to be found, I guess. People report seeing faces in the boiler room, hearing strange noises, equipment malfunctions, footsteps. Some report seeing a full apparition with and without a head, and this is thought to be RD Wall. But like I said, this isn't all new. A former inmate claims that he was pushed down a flight of stairs. A former guard would tell how he'd be walking down corridors and he could hear footsteps of inmates coming up behind him, and nobody would be there. The North Hall was where the most dangerous prisoners were held in the facility, and is said to be extremely active. This is where the most dangerous offenders were held, like Red Schneider. William Red Schneider was the leader of the Aryan Brotherhood. He was held in the part of the penitentiary where they were locked away for 22 and a half hours a day. He was a very violent man. He was born in 1946, and he was in and out of the facility multiple times. He committed arson in his 20s. He was paroled in 1967. And the day after being paroled from West Virginia Penitentiary, he found out that his younger sister, who was 15 at the time, was in love with the neighbor boy. He was enraged. His father tried to stop him, and Red shot his father. Then he marched over to the other family's house. The parents weren't home, but 8 of the children were, and he held them all hostage. And when the father of the boy that his sister loved got home, Red shot him in the head, murdering 2 men the day after he got paroled. He was brought back to the West Virginia Penitentiary. He was feared / respected in the prison. People said of him, like, if you leave him alone, he'll return the favor. It's believed that Red was one of the instigators of the last riot that took place at Moundsville. When Sam and Colby went and did their little investigation, they played his theme song to his favorite show, The Days of Our Lives. to try to get him going. On Sunday, November 15th, 1992, another inmate named Rusty stopped by Red's cell. It was no big deal. They were friends. Or Red thought they were friends. They had a conversation, and then suddenly Rusty pulled out a sharp piece of metal and began attacking Red. The guards said of this, the cell was red and Red was dead. Red, being a very active spirit there now, likes to touch women, stroke their hair, touch their shoulders. And it said he's not as nice to the male visitors. He's likely to let the men know what he thinks about them. And there was a tour guide, Maggie Gray, that walked by Red's cell one day, long after the facility had been closed. And she heard, "Morning, Mags." Also from the North Hall, there was an inmate named Danny Lehman, or Spider, who was the one that was appointed to negotiate during the riot. He was stabbed in the eye and ended up dying from a hemorrhage. He's also seen or heard around the halls. Paranormal groups and investigators have claimed to have captured many EVPs, shadow figures, orbs in that area. The Sugar Shack is also one of the most active hotspots, with temperature spikes, reports of being touched, shadow men being seen, hearing noises, or hearing arguing, talking, or whispering. The wheel at the entrance, the gate that turns like a ride, is said to have moved on its own. And the North Wagon Gate, the first part of the structure built, is said to be super active. This is where all the executions took place, the hangings, then the electric chair, where nearly 100 people were executed. Here, people report seeing figures, hearing disembodied voices or strange sounds. Orville Adkins was one of those botched executions that's said to be very active there. He kidnapped a priest who was later found dead, and he was condemned to be hanged. He was getting the noose put around his neck, and somehow the trapdoor was pulled too soon, and he fell 20 feet, and he was hurt, but he still needed to be hung again. So they walked him back up, hung him until he was dead, and people, while by that gate, report the feeling of being watched or hearing footsteps thought to be Atkins, or you can just hear him pacing. Theories about why the penitentiary is haunted: many will say it's due to the building or the ground being partially on a Native American burial mound. Others will tell you it's the spirits that remain because they're restless and have not sought forgiveness. Or maybe these spirits are caught between planes, unable to go any further. I mean, I guess some of them may even feel institutionalized. They didn't feel like they had another home other than the prison system, so they just remain. This is the only place they felt comfortable. Well, some say it might be the manner of death, the harsh conditions that left an imprint of the building and the land. This being reinforced by the reports of the residual hauntings. It's like a spirit running in a loop, playing over and over and over again, not acknowledging anything around it. But the Moundsville State Penitentiary, or the West Virginia State Penitentiary, is located at 818 Jefferson Ave in Moundsville, West Virginia. It's a tourist attraction, offering guided day tours. They even have seasonal things, like I think right now it said they have Escape the Pen, like an escape room. They have a haunted house, a lights out tour. They have conventions, museum. It was said to be a training facility for correction officers for a time. I'm not sure if that's still active or not. And it's also been a filming location for Castle Rock. I never saw that show, but I read that a crew member, when they were filming, kept reporting feeling something brush behind her. So she had them hire somebody just to stay with her so she wasn't alone in the facility. And part of Mindhunter was filmed here. I love that show so much. Sam and Colby did an episode here, Ghost Adventures. On the Ghost Adventures episode, an old inmate came in with them, and he talked about how there was like some sort of disturbance, riot, something in the mess hall or the dining area. And inmates literally took an inmate and threw him in a pot of beans, cooking him alive. But if you do go visit and none of those haunted, dark, spooky experiences sound like they're for you, they also offer a princess tea. So random. If anyone has gone, I would love to hear your stories of any encounters or interactions or any experiences you have had there. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you need more content or just want to help support the podcast, head on over to patreon.com and search Ouch, Was That a Ghost? If you need some snazzy merch, you can find it at crowdmade.com by searching Ouch, Was That a Ghost? If you have a story you'd like to share, you can email it to ouchwasthataghost@yahoo.com. You can also find us on Facebook and all the other social media platforms under Ouch, Was That a Ghost?
Help me.
All links can also be found on ouchwasthataghost.com.